Right. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for a very warm welcome. Well, my name is Don John, and I have little tolerance for racism. I've spent much of my working life identifying it, addressing it, and confronting it. You could say it's been my life's work. I intend to share with you why I think Black history matters, not just to me, but also to you. Yes, I know that Black Lives Matter has occupied the centre ground in race politics in recent times, and it certainly has got everyone's attention. But it is an appreciation of our history that helps us to understand its relevance. I'm going to break this presentation up into three parts. Firstly, awareness, then discovery, and then delivery. Okay, black, 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 and even more black. How does that word make you feel? Does it already invoke emotions that you're a little unsure of? Some say the trouble really started when coloured people turned into black people. So what does that tell us? I think it was Walter Benjamin who said, history is written by the victors. So what does that mean to a black boy who was raised in a culture dominated by the myth of the Commonwealth? I went to a grammar school, didn't do me any harm, and studied Latin, Greek, ancient history, and the victories of the empire. So where was my black history? Okay, picture this. A world where black people are up to 37 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. A world where black people are 3 times more likely to be arrested than white people. A world where black people are 44% more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act than white people. A world where black people are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than white people. We seem to be somewhere between the mad and the bad, or perhaps both. Now, my father was one of those proud Africans where status and position was everything. And he believed religiously, yes, religiously, in education, education, and education. Can't believe I'm quoting Tony Blair, but what was I thinking of? School gave us a world where the pink bits on the map, on the world map, was the context that underpinned our understanding of that world. Africa was the dark continent where they all lived in mud huts and they travelled by swinging from tree to tree. And white Tarzan was the king of the jungle in black Africa. And Christianity was a step towards our salvation. I always remember that iconic image of Stanley meeting Livingstone. Do you remember that picture? Like 2 great gods, a civilizing influence in this dark, dark world. I guess the context of my Sierra Leonean background should have given me a greater understanding, but the heroes we were reminded of were people like Sir Walter Raleigh and Francis Drake. You remember those guys? The English hero who coolly played bowls when the Spanish Armada was approaching, but casually said he had to finish the game. How very English. And it was only later that I learned that he was a pirate and a slave and well invested in the slave industry. I was shocked, and he certainly was not my kind of hero. Furthermore, the history we learned was the shame of slavery, and we were constantly reminded that our own black people assisted in the process of our historical enslavement and subjugation. So was this my black history? Well, this was the family plan. My older sister was to become a solicitor, and she did. My younger brother was to go to Oxford, and he did. And I was to become a doctor. We know what happened to that plan. However, hallelujah, I was saved, and I joined a place called Her Majesty's Treasury and ended up working in the Chancellor's office. And the Chancellor at that time was a guy called Dennis Healy. What an experience for a young black man. The only young black man in a sea of pinstripes and moral certitude, a world where those pink bits on the map were ever so important. And when I left the Treasury, I took that damn map with me. I've still got it in my room, actually, at home. One thing about the map was Great Britain was disproportionately larger than it really was, strange it may seem. And it actually was in the centre of the world. And that line from the glorious hymn, Rule Britannia, echoed in my head. You remember that one? Britons never, never, never shall be slaves. Always wondered what that was all about and started to suspect something was afoot. Strange times. However, it was the civil rights movement of the 60s and the 70s that woke me from my slumber, where I voraciously consumed literature from people like Alex Haley, Eldridge Cleaver, Bobby Seale, Frantz Fanon, Angela Davis. And as a young man, I absolutely loved it. I was awake, or so I thought. However, it was the arrival of a remarkable young man who doubled our numbers in the Treasury. There were two of us in there now. It's almost like a riot, isn't it? And focused that new state of awareness. His name was Linton Kwesi Johnson, and the history of his footprint is a matter of public record. Though at that time, the Kwesi bit had not been born. So what did we do? We wrote poetry, we went to bookshops, but more than anything else, we supported each other in that sea of what I call blinding whiteness. Linton left and went to Goldsmith, and I asked myself, what on earth was I doing there? My life had been enriched by this greater knowledge and awareness, and I also left and decided to go to the Caribbean for 6 months or so and discovered a world where black people had some say in their own destiny and were seemingly more connected to their black history mostly. But, as they say, the first step towards change is awareness. And the knowledge of our black history was starting to make some kind of sense. Okay, discovery. We're getting close to what black history means to me. My work in race relations in Southampton was a logical next step in my desire to immerse myself in matters relating to my black culture. And this city of Southampton gave me the means to explore that heritage and history at a grassroots level, and in an environment where I felt that I could make a difference. Fertile ground. Southampton at that time was still confused about who these black people were, why they all lived in Derby Road, and those who know Southampton know exactly what I mean, and why the area they lived in was called the jungle. I do recall when I was making a film about black unemployment in the early 80s with a local ITV company, the editing room was labelled Coons Cabin, and that was the way things were at that time. This was a time when there was a heightened level of consciousness, and black youth were flexing their newfound pride and were more sensitized to the experiences that their parents had endured stoically. However, these young people had no time for the stiff upper lip and just wanted to kick some ass. And they did, and I helped them. Bad, bad person. Black pride and a sense of black history were the tools we deployed, and a deep desire to recognize and confront the injustices that were a way of life for black communities. This was becoming a crucial part of my black history. So why did these black people keep going on about black this and black that? And why was this assertion of who they were so disturbing for many? The assertion of that consciousness was certainly a threat, and black people became more organised, partly through the support of racial equality organisations and empathetic local people, and started to challenge the accepted norms in the major institutions like the local authorities, the police services, health and social services, and others. The political climate at that time nationally played its part in disavowing racist opinion, unlike the political situation we have in the here and now. There was a time, indeed, when black studies was an essential part of our cultural education in the black communities, and we clenched our fists and we wailed and protested and marched, and many of you, white people, marched with us, and this did make a difference. Perhaps the assertion of our real black history is our new form of protest. Delivery. The Black History Movement was formally celebrated in Southampton from 2005, even though there were random acknowledgements prior to that. However, the real confusion again was who was it for? And who was allowed to celebrate it? Some white people felt that they should not intrude in this private grief. Some people of mixed race were unsure whether they should get involved, and would they be betraying the white side of their family? And some black people were embarrassed about us going on about this black stuff all the time. It just made things bad for black people who'd quietly found a place for themselves by not making too much noise. Nonetheless, there were many black and white who welcomed this and have contributed to what we have now. In the first couple of years, Black History Month kicked off with, yes, a still band with white people, and of course a slavery exhibition. It seems more embarrassing now than it did at the time. However, it gradually coaxed white Southampton citizens into accepting the idea of loads of black people coming together in a large group without being policed and not singing and dancing. The main objectives of Black History Month were and still are to promote the knowledge of black history. You'd be surprised at what people don't know. In fact, many people still believe that Egypt is not in Africa. They really don't believe that. Second thing, to disseminate information on positive black contributions. Because you see, the knowledge of what black people have done must influence people's perceptions of what black people are capable of. And thirdly, to heighten the confidence and awareness of black people in their cultural heritage, an inevitable consequence. Now, the key thing that many failed to grasp initially was this was just not our history, but a history that belonged to all of us. And we in the South played a crucial part, and such information is available if you choose to look for it. So let us just look at relatively basic information that does not fall so easily into our laps. Black inventors, for starters. The three-way traffic light and the gas mask, invented by Garrett Morgan, a black man. The Three Musketeers, a book, a film, a play, Alexander Dumas, a black man. The blood bank that we depend on so much for our health, Charles Drew, a black man. The guitar, Robert Fleming Jr., a black man. The lawnmower, J.A. Burr, a black man, and many, many more. I can go on and on about black inventors that people don't know anything about. Of course, there will be many who will seek to debunk all of these, much in the same way Napoleon's soldiers thought that if they smashed the noses from the Sphinx and early Egyptian statues, and we didn't notice, they could erase the African history of the Egyptian civilization and dwell academically on the possibility of alien intervention. Because, of course, black people could never have the technical expertise to construct the pyramids of Giza. Always reminds me of Muhammad Ali's classic answer to why, as a child, he always saw images of white angels and never black angels. And he suggests that they were obviously in the kitchen making the milk and honey, as they do. Nonetheless, Black history does more than tick in the boxes of accomplishments. It provides us with a sense of who we are and therefore who we can be. Unfortunately, we still have an issue about our identity. And back in the day, if we were not white, we were black. And it was much simpler. Complexion was less relevant. Malcolm X being a classic example, light-skinned, but at that time, one of the blackest men on the planet. Yes, I concede that it is now fashionable to have several cultural identities, and people are quite rightly proud of all aspects of these identities. However, sometimes I wonder how far the black aspects of these many identities are relegated to the periphery of our consciousness. So where does that leave us? When our forebears came here, they came with a history that some of them were not even aware of. Many also brought with them a perception of themselves, and sometimes a twisted perception was a consequence of the Western history that was fed to local black people in the colonies, which systematically and purposefully denied their true heritage and identity. Sadly, some of this legacy has continued, in my view, to infect some black people's perceptions of themselves, and so it gets handed down further and further down the line. But what compounded this even further was Western society's capacity to weave in the narrative of racial superiority and to convert that into many aspects of the encounters between black and white peoples. The knowledge of black history will not completely eradicate the falsehood still in play, but it may be one small step in helping all of us in more fully appreciating the part that black people have played and are still playing in the development of the world as we know it. Yes, black history matters to you and to me. Thank you very much for listening.